Welcome to SwarmCast, the marketing hive for pest control pros from coast to coast. If you're tired of your competition bugging you and want to grow your business like a well-built colony, you're in the right place. Each episode, we'll break down the latest marketing trends, expert insights, and proven strategies to help you exterminate the competition and keep your phones buzzing. So strap in, pest bosses. It's time to swarm the market and take your business to the next level. This is SwarmCast.
Welcome to the SwarmCast. Today I'm here with Adam Chronister, founder of Enleaf. This guy is all over the planet speaking. I met him in Cancun and just can't take my eyes off the content he puts out there and the wisdom he brings to the industry, demystifying SEO, AEO, AI. Welcome to the show, Adam. We've been wanting to have you on the podcast for quite some time, and we're honing in on pest control owners, small to medium-sized business, and it really even goes beyond that. Let's talk about the last 90 days. What do you see going on in the Google sphere and AI space?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for those that maybe aren't paying attention or haven't seen the news yet is Google is making one of what they've called their largest changes to search in over 25 years, right? And this is a direct response to the way that large language models are changing how people search for questions and answers and solutions, right? And they've been in a position where they obviously need to compete with ChatGPT, Claudes, and the Perplexities of the world. They've essentially announced that they're going to be like dismantling the traditional search bar as we know it, the 10 blue links that we're all accustomed to. That's a pretty big shift for the entire ecosystem, which is slowly rolling out now, right? We assume that that's going to mean that there's going to be more and more degradation of things like click-through rate. But on the flip side, the nature of how people search now tends to get people further down the buying funnel, right? And that can be advantageous in some regards because even though traffic quantity for a lot of verticals is starting to degrade, in some verticals, the quality is much higher, meaning that maybe your traffic, even possibly your rankings, depending on what industry you're in, may start to decline. But hopefully, if you position yourself well in all of these systems, you're going to be in a scenario where you're going to get higher quality of traffic. That's the biggest change.
But that's a good point that you make. I know that there's that search bar. It has changed. People are no longer just typing keywords. They're really asking questions. And we see the AI overviews popping, right? If you're not in the AI overview, what can you start doing about that? And that's kind of what your book talks about. There's a new book Adam put out there on authority. Talk to us about that a little bit.
Yeah, so as mentioned, I'm launching a book. It's going to be coming out officially July 7th, but it is in pre-order. So those that want to grab it, you can just do a search on Amazon for Authority Engineering. But the whole book is essentially a simulation of what I've been kind of discussing for probably a year and a half now, right? It's this idea that search as we know it is changing. Search used to be kind of dominant by search engines where the mechanisms that, allowed businesses to show up prominently were things like backlink, content structure, technical structure of your website. And while all those things still matter, there's now a broader set of signals, and it's really what I call consensus signal, right? It's not just what happens on your site, but it's what happens outside of your site and how that consensus is consistent across different channels. This can be your website, your social media presence, directories, third-party blog posts. So now, where it's less about focusing on a said keyword, it's what is the consensus of what you do, how you're different, and how can you spread that across different channels. For us, that's reemerged the necessity for PR and other tactics that are similar to that. This podcast is a good example, right? One of the things that we're doing for our own company, Enleaf, is working on outreach and getting on other platforms. So, spreading, that consensus across a podcast, on a blog post, all these different channels, like that's kind of the key, right?
Yeah, 100%. We've been hearing the omnipresence word for a long time where a lot of SEOs didn't focus as much on like social media, for example, or these channels we're talking about. but now it's becoming a necessity. Reddit is a big play now. Almost any search you do, you see a Reddit thread. What are your thoughts on Reddit?
That can be viable. I don't know if it's the first place start, just because there are a lot of complexities and kind of gatekeeping elements. A lot of what works on Reddit is kind of twofold. There's either the slow and steady, like build out a particular thread, which can take a lot of time, or there's kind of the more like black hat tactics that are out there that also work, but also, have a higher risk, higher reward. I think the goal that we're trying to achieve for our clients and instill in those that are looking to make success in this realm is not to ignore sites like Reddit, but to think of that as just one single channel. To really think more multi-channel, right? I'll give you an example. We're doing a lot with like stacking different content pieces. One of the things that we've started to employ for our clients is the creation of listicles. So basically award-based listicles that we will place on third-party websites, typically websites that have some kind of relevance or authority to the client's business. From there, then we will stack on top of that list a press release. We'll mention that award on the client's website. So add maybe like an award badge. We'll distribute the mention of that award in press release or in social media rather. And so again, that's an example where we're taking one accolade, whether it's earned or kind of prescriptive, and stacking that consensus across different channels. Because large language models, they work a little bit different than traditional search. They're looking at what does the broad set of data tell me about a particular business or brand, and it's looking across data sets. That's what large language models really do well, is they're really good at parsing data, but they're not very good at like parsing whether data is or should be valuable, right? And so we're in this kind of golden opportunity where as long as you can create enough signal, versus noise, it's pretty simple to get that visibility in these large language models. The gatekeepers that we have with traditional search, like backlink authority or traditionally paid, those mechanisms aren't quite baked in yet. And so, yeah, it's kind of the Wild West at this juncture. I assume there will be probably a point at which that starts to change, where these large language models come up with alternative algorithms to basically parse out authority. But right now, it's really like, what is the loudest signal out there? And that is the source of truth.
I love that. I mean, for people that are watching this, when you say a listicle, what would be an example of a listicle or a pest control company? Give me an example.
Yeah, so it could be something as simple as top 10 pest control companies in the West Coast, right?
Oh, perfect. Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah,
So you would write an article on that with a
right.
backlink to your own pest control company. Now, it would
Yeah.
have to be a legitimate, it's not on your website per se. It's going to be
Right.
on a
This will be a
third-party
third-party
site.
website.
And there's places for pest control companies like PCT Magazine. There's other authorities out there where you can reach out and have them do a write-up. It doesn't
Yeah.
all have to be who's the best pest control company. It might be something about innovation. It could be on a variety of topics. What would the press release have in it for something like that?
Yeah. So whether you're creating the listicle, right, kind of creating your own award, or it's something that you've earned naturally, then you basically just want to tell the world about it, right? ABC company won, top 10 pest control companies in the West Coast for 2026, right? That's the big thing, is telling the world about what you're doing. There's a lot of good businesses out there, but they haven't spent the time really distributing the message they want to communicate to the wider audience. And now is kind of that golden era where it's like, hey, if you can disseminate this, in a press release, across social media, put it on your website, like those LLMs basically just look for a consistent message and say, okay, I see a consistent message here, I see it there, and I see it, in another place. Takes all of that and says, well, this must be the source of truth because it's consistently a concept or a messaging that is out there in the public. And the newer a business is, or the less basically noise they have out in the market, the easier this is to manufacture. I'll give you an example. We did a case study, and this was based off of a dummy business. So basically, we have a couple test bed businesses. They have legitimate websites, legitimate Google business profiles, but the business is really just kind of a proxy for testing different synopsis. We created one particular press release for a business in Austin, Texas, again, fabricated business. We wanted to see if we could simply create a single press release, fabricate the idea that this business created awards, right? So we found different award outlets in Austin, said in this press release that they won these awards and just wanted to see, would this stick? Sure enough, we looked in the large language models about 2 weeks later, and it referenced these awards from that single press release. Now, prior to that, it said, hey, there's not enough information to verify if said business is of high value or not. We wouldn't just fabricate an award, but we can help manufacture an award, because a lot of these awards that you get, it's just somebody who's doing a write-up for you, right? In fact, I'm sure a lot of businesses get PR companies saying, hey, we want to feature you. And then you go through the rigmarole and you pay them $500. The reality is that's how almost all PR works. It's just some of it's a little bit more polished. But we kind of have found that, we're going to embrace it. We're going to play the game that's out there, but knowing that that is kind of how large PR works, whether it's, on the big stage or the small stage. A lot of it's really pale at the end of the day.
Well, what's nice is that some solid R&D, right? I mean, I think a lot of people stray away from doing, or what I would say, these press releases, because there wasn't really a whole lot of payback, right?
Right.
And I remember going to spend a couple hundred for a press release and it wouldn't do anything. I'm going back in the time machine, but now you're saying, no, it's worth it. Now, all these press release sites that you can do a distribution on are not created equal. Is there one that you like using that you like to send people to?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is, going back to your point, we used to do press releases for the backlink, right?
That's right.
We still include backlinks in there for the SEO value, but it's very minimal, right? These days, we're using it for the consensus.
That's right.
Now, the great thing is you don't have to spend a lot of money on a huge PR syndication outlet. There are times where that is worth it, right? Especially if you want to go more the traditional PR route and you're hoping
Sure.
to get a good reach on a big story, which is kind of a gamble, right? It might get good pickup, it might not. But we have created systems where we can literally generate PR outlines with AI. And then we'll leverage those with like free PR outlets, right? So there's a lot of outlets there that will allow you to do free press release syndication. So one is Open PR Log, and there's like a handful of others that are completely free. Open PR right now is a great one. You get one free press release syndication per month. And we're noticing that it almost always pops in Google News, which means Google picks it up and it has a wider spread. So you can literally do this for no cost. Basically, the cost or time of creating a press release and syndicating it to a single syndication outlet for free, getting it picked up in Google News, and then that's typically going to get that relevance in the large language models, especially if you take that press release or that accolade and you disseminate it further. You mentioned it on your press or on your social media platforms. You mentioned it on your website, those sorts of things.
That's awesome. That's a great tip, especially for ones that have never done this before. It doesn't cost a thing if you find the right one. And then there's lower costs. I think I've had this conversation with before about, hey, there's under $100, you can do a nice press release out there, get a nice syndication. But these are great tips, and mainly the take home is, hey, we're sending signals. The LLMs are picking up to give us authority. That authority then translates to coming up in overviews. It's impacting, I mean, what are the big four LLMs that you like to play towards? Gemini, ChatGPT, what else do you like to play towards?
Yeah, and the main ones that we look at right now, as far as like visibility, is ChatGPT. They have a lot of market share. Gemini, because it's basically Google at this point. Perplexity has a lot of adoption. And then I would say secondary to that, as far as like showing up in placement, is going to be Claude and Croc, right? It's probably the inverse. And when it comes to like development, as far as like development and creating tools, like Claude is like number one right now. But market share, ChatGPT and Gemini, I think, still are pretty predominant, and probably third is going to be something like Perplexity, right?
That's some great advice on what to look at. I know that recently GA4 is now including this in their analytics, what's coming back as far as what LLMs have hit your site. And I know the Microsoft announcement just happened, 2 days ago. I see a lot of these big players now including it in their analytics. Do you have a platform that you like to use to track that kind of stuff?
Yeah, we started out before even like analytics and these other systems, started creating attribution. And, we still need to dive into that. But we've actually created a whole mechanism that uses, what's called regular expression, filter out traffic that are coming from those platforms. So technically, you've been able to do this for months now with Google Analytics, but it was fairly technical. It required, a long string of text to filter it out. Your normal, layman's probably not going to be able to do that or have the expertise. So it has been helpful to see that, these systems, the Google Analytics and the Search Consoles and the Bing, back-end tools are starting to adopt this. We knew it was just a matter of time, but we didn't want to wait for that, right? There's other tools. There's like one that we use. It's a third-party tool called Wayk, which stands for What AI Knows About You. So that's one that we use and integrate into our tool sets. There's some analytics now coming in tools like SEMrush, and there's some other keyword research tools. There's starting to become more and more of these out there. So unlike, even 6 months ago, the ability to do prompt tracking and that kind of thing is becoming a lot more approachable, right?
I think when I was testing it out, and we're going back a couple months ago, I would ask a question and ask the same question and always pull back the same result.
Yeah.
And so there's a certain amount of variance there. Is that still the case today? There's still variance in those kind of things?
Yeah, there's still variance. I mean, like tracking prompts is not an exact science, right? It's not as like black and white as even keyword tracking, which even that has some nuances. And it is still one of those things where even traffic, like the amount of actual traffic coming from large language models is still pretty minimal comparatively to traditional search engines, right? So we have to keep all these things in mind. Like this is a moving target, even though we see the percentages with our clients like growing, it's still a very small subset of a lot of clients' traffic. Nonetheless, we know that that's going to continue to grow. And then, it'll be interesting to see how the emergence of attribution from traditional search to large language models blend with Google kind of creating or going towards a hybrid LLM model for search.
That's awesome. A good question is, if I am going to start using some of these other tools, maybe a social media engine, which one would do you have a stack of which ones you like to target first? Do you like going to YouTube next, or do you like going to what's your favorite go-to next after SEO just on a website per se? What's your next move?
I mean, I think as far as visibility goes, like short form videos are really popular. They're starting to be promoted more in the search engines. We've had a lot of success with like Google Shorts, right? Luckily, there's a lot of platforms out there that will allow you to take long form video, even like something like this podcast, and easily cut it up into short clips and then syndicate it across platforms. So I really like short form video, whether it's TikTok or YouTube Shorts or Instagram. I think that seems to be what a lot of systems are promoting right now, just because that's where the audience is, right? I still am a little Google centric just because, the second largest search engine is still YouTube. So I think that's a good channel to be a part of, especially if you can take one outlet, one piece of medium, and syndicate it across channels.
That's awesome. Is there a tool that you like using for the YouTube or the shorts syndication? Do you have a tool you like to use?
Right now, we're just using Opus. Yeah. And
Yep.
so that works quite well. A lot of people are building their own tools, and there's a lot of other like competitors, but that's a good, easy entry level tool. We're not really a big media company, so we're not doing a lot with video or any of that stuff, but that allows us to get in and get out, create some content, and distribute it to the world without a lot of like, fanfare or production chops. A lot of it's done inside the platform. So that's what we're using and really enjoy it.
Love it. Yeah, Opus is a great tool. One of the ones that I've been diving back into is HeyGen because of some of its new
Similar.
features. And I was training somebody yesterday on it, and I discovered, wow, this is able to do agenic commercial creation, not just talking head and multi-language. And it pretty much
Right.
blew me away. We did a commercial for a large museum here. I think we're going to work on a project together there. I picked somebody that wanted to use like an avatar threw a little script in there, and it went and pulled media clips from this museum. Like
Yeah,
went, pulled it in, and then chopped, sliced, and diced it together. And I was like, wow, that would have took me hours to edit,
right.
you know?
Yep.
And so agents come a long way, you know, but
There's another tool. We haven't started using it yet, but I know some people in the industry are using it, and it's pretty crazy. It's called Higgsfield. That's another really cool tool. Like, I mean, you can create full on, video commercials with it, and
oh,
with
wow.
very small inputs. You can take a product and it will crop the whole product and put it in a background that makes it look like a professionally done, magazine ad. So that's a pretty powerful cool tool that, I think we're going to be looking at here in the future as well.
You know, there's going to be this fine line between, you know, using AI for commercials and reels. And you do a search, it's pulling up videos in the search, you know,
Yeah.
especially if somebody has a lot of them out there. I saw your knowledge panels loaded. I looked up your name and you got the knowledge panel. But as you go down, then you have videos, and the short
Hmm.
form videos really support the Google Knowledge Panel, especially
Yeah.
for authorities out there. You've done a good job with that. I'm thinking about just the basic business owner that they don't have time to do all this stuff. You know, maybe it makes sense to work with an agency or, you know, somebody like Enleaf, but they should be following the trends. How many times
Yeah.
have you come across an agency and they're like doing stuff or running playbooks from a year ago or 2 years ago? Do you
Oh,
find that a lot?
yeah. Yeah, we still, I mean, there's still businesses that don't have websites. And it's like, you know what I mean? Now we're having debates like, are websites even going to matter in, 5 years? And I think they still very much will. But the fact that there's businesses out there that don't even have websites, like that still blows my mind. They're using a Facebook as their primary website. And it's just like, there is a lot, there's a lot that goes into making your brand show up in search, whether we're talking about AI search or search engines. And so it is good to have an agency on your side, right? What I typically compared it to is you could spend probably the similar amount to hire somebody fresh out of college with a, decent marketing degree as you would with an agency. The difference is usually somebody out of college is going to have, they're going to have their strong suits, whatever their focus was, and then they're going to have their deficits. Typically, with a good agency, for the same cost base as a standalone marketing expert in-house, you're going to have a full staff that's going to work with you. Depending on the campaign, you're going to have writers, digital marketers, developers, videographers, right? So for a lot of businesses, not all of them, but for a lot of them, that is the way to go, right?
Absolutely. You know, a lot of the businesses I work with my agency, they don't have a six-figure CMO. A lot of
Right.
them just don't. And I mean,
Yeah.
that even goes up into the $20 million range businesses where the owner's still trying to pull it off.
Yeah.
You know, power to them if they're able to do it. But if you have a team that's able to do and support what you do, man, you can get so much more out there. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that you contribute on a lot of different sources. You travel around the world and talk about these topics. How do you stay up to date with this stuff? Is there like certain places you like to go to, or is it just constant R&D with what you're doing?
It's a little bit of both, to be honest. I mean, luckily I have a team that like they're sharing the load of keeping up with everything. So sometimes they alert me to things and I alert them to things. I'm in, a particular algorithmic feed just like everybody else. A part of that are certain people that are always announcing the newest things that are coming out in the world of search or AI. So that helps. I think just keeping a general interest in it, and then the algorithms kind of take care of the rest. Now, that's not going to be everybody. I work in the realm of digital marketing, so I'm going to see some of that. But for the average person, they're not unless they go out seeking that information. But yeah, it is a fire hose. It's changing fast. But really, this is the world we live in. It's the world that me and our team have lived in for a long time. We're accustomed to change. It's a big part of what we do. I call it job security, even though sometimes it makes me want to pull my hair out, right? So,
What's nice is a lot of the research can be done with automation now. You know, it used to be we had to wait for a periodical to come out
yeah,
or maybe somebody drop a video or a post. Now we could deploy an agent to go collect all this information, what happened in the last week, bring it back, tidy it up, and give me a one-page summary of what just happened. That's
yeah,
nice that there's an example of a research tool, and I'm thinking about some of the listeners here where maybe they just do a research in their local area. Like if they're competing with other pest control owners, maybe they come back and find out of all the data, what's really impacting
Yep.
this area. So, like I find that that's helped me a lot as opposed to scouring a bunch of feeds or trying to go look for this information.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's like finding information these days is not the problem. The problem
No.
is finding good information. And what I tell people, especially I get a lot of people that say, hey, I want to start with digital marketing. I want to learn this. Where do I start? I typically say, find one or two people that you think feel kind of like they're credible and just follow their stuff and ignore everyone else. Right? Otherwise, you're going to get a lot of differing opinions on, oh, this works or this doesn't. It also is like a great adage. It's like find somebody else who is doing what you want to do or who is where you want to be. And if they're creating content or media, start following that because there's a good chance if they've already done it and they're providing information, that information is probably going to lead you in the right direction.
Absolutely. I mean, in the algorithm, I know how on Facebook, I get constantly served up marketing software ads.
Yeah, likewise.
It picks up on those interests pretty quick, but that's how I end up finding some of the new R&D tools to test. And then you and me
Yeah,
know a lot of people in the agency space that are leaders, right? They're in that
right.
1%. And
Yep.
it's always nice to be a part of those masterminds that kind of share this kind of stuff.
Yep.
Part of what I do is I created a mastermind in the pest control space so that I can bring out solutions. One of the things that we talked about a couple of days ago is, hey, Google came out with, hey, facts don't really matter. Something along those lines is the headline. And then you said, hey, Wyatt, that might be true for the algorithm, but what about all the other language models? What about, Google's not the only player in town anymore. I
Yeah.
still think that facts are still a good thing to put on the page. And I wouldn't disagree with you. I think, yeah, maybe it wasn't as important to their specific space, but now you don't want to miss out on somebody does end up on that page and has a question to be answered. You know,
Yeah.
it is nice to take, let's just say somebody spent a lot of time on their facts, is to take that knowledge and push that into your AI chatbot, right? So it can answer
Yeah.
questions. Any other like practical suggestions on formatting of pages? How should I have my page put together for AEO, for example? What should I do?
Yeah. Well, I mean, getting back to the topic of facts, like that's one of the challenges but opportunities of large language models, right? If the information that you have, whether you wrote it or AI wrote it, is essentially information that is already out there in the ether in the wild, there's a better chance that it's going to get buried in these systems. And that's where having unique content really helps, right? So, if I was a business owner, like a small business owner, I would sit down in front of a camera, be just your voice recorder. You can even fire up ChatGPT and say, hey, I want you to interview me as a podcast host, ask me questions about my business that maybe only I would be able to answer. You create a transcript of things that come from you, right? Personal experiences or personal anecdotes or things that you've learned on the job that maybe are not going to be publicly available, or at least phrased in the way that you as a tenured senior business owner would know. That is the kind of stuff that is going to stand out, right? If you're just creating another long form blog on pest control, best practices, and there's 300 other blog posts on the same general topic, good luck getting that much attention. But if you're creating content that is based on some personal experience, personal testimony, personal anecdotes, or even stats that that aren't as publicly available, like 1 out of 10 customers has this particular problem in our company, like that's the kind of stuff that's going to stand out when it comes to these large language models, because they're also looking at for like what's novel, what's not just regurgitated. Also, keep in mind that like large language models operate more and more like voice search, right? Question and answer. So the better you can structure your Q&A scenarios on a website, the better you're going to be, right? So, having FAQs on a lot of prominent pages, that's something that we implement with our web design practices. There's other technologies like schema markup, which is more technical, but having that implemented correctly can be a big asset for search engines and LLMs. That sort of stuff is really helpful, right?
Love it. Yeah, I think it's very powerful where stop trying to type everything into AI. In
Yeah.
fact, I'm seeing it now in some of the models I'm using where it says you'll get better results if you speak into it. Stop trying to formulate it. That was good advice. And so when I sit down with a business owner and we're talking, every conversation, I take the transcript, I push it into my proposal process, and then you get a better proposal, right? Because
Yeah.
that's really what a proposal is. I heard what you said.
Yep.
This is what we're
And
going to
that's
achieve. Yeah.
that's exactly the same model that I used for my book Authority Engineering, right? What I did is I created an AI system that went out and it crawled every podcast interview that I had been on. It took and created transcripts from like every talk that I gave publicly, and based off of that created this massive file called a .md file. And then I used that as a preface for how to structure my book. So basically I let AI take my experience of spoken word and say, okay, based on this, help me create the structure of my book. Now what we're doing is our team is starting to rework our own brand like copy, like our service pages for our own agency. But I'm referencing that MD file, that reference file, and my book to pull information in, quotes or notable elements when it comes to a service page about web design or about Google Ads, so that it has some of that unique element that is not going to be found anywhere else because it's my voice, right? So that's the way to think about it as a business owner is what do I have to contribute to the world that's unique, and how do I put that into a medium that search engines and search systems can better understand?
Yeah, I love that. That's so deep. I wrote a book last year for the pest control industry, basically like the AI handbook. And that was after doing about 30 plus podcasts. Now,
Nice.
like what you just shared, what I would have done then when I wrote it is do exactly what you said.
Yeah.
Take the transcript from each one, create an MD file, and then write this book. Didn't have that knowledge at the time. Now I do. That's fantastic. But I'm
Yeah.
thinking about just the content you do produce. Some pest control companies or authorities out there will do a podcast, but here's yet another use case for that content.
Yeah.
So what's nice about that content, it's already been produced. You went back and just repurposed it, which is
Yeah.
fantastic. I love it. I love it.
And that's one
Yeah.
thing too that we're doing too. And this is on offer to you as well. Anyone that purchases the book, I've actually created 3 core applications around it that are accessible to anyone that purchases Authority Engineering. Basically, there is a book generator, right? So the same framework I used to create my book was partially built by reverse engineering what's working in the book industry, but it also uses input that you create. So I created a whole application for that. You can basically create a 30,000 word book that has your own insights and experience for a couple dollars. I think it comes out to $2 in AI credits, right? You can pull in your own API key, so you can use Claude, ChatGPT. We've also created a press release generator. So you basically just put in the questions. You don't have to think about or know how to write a press release. You just answer a series of questions, and out comes your press release. And then the third one is for mediums like this. If you want to show up on other people's podcasts, we have a podcast pitch studio tool that allows you to get in front of tailored audiences. It pre-creates the outreach script, so that all you have to do is send it out, right? So
Mm.
I took all of those concepts that helped me create this book, put those into real life applications that are a supplement to that whole system.
That's awesome, man. These are powerful tools, and just the fact that you thought about using it for that purpose, that excites me. I mean, now I can't wait to read the book, and I have it sitting in my inbox. Thank you for that.
Yeah, of
Can't wait to
course.
get a copy of that. I know that we'll do events next year. I'll have to see if we can get you to come out and talk about some events. But in the same token,
Love that.
looking to have some case studies. And we're
Yeah.
always R&Ding in the in the background. So would love to ping you with some of those things. Well, I know that we've talked about a lot of different topics in this space. Maybe play a little bit of future. What's going to happen in the next 12 months? What do you see coming down that businesses should be doing now as opposed to being way behind the curve?
I mean, I think it's going to be a lot of the same, just compounded, right? We haven't talked a lot about local, which I know is very big for your audience as well as a lot of our customers. One of the things I see with generalized search or search engines going more to these large language models, I've seen Google make moves to really double down on local, specifically Google Maps, right? They're starting to implement a lot more rollouts of different things there. And so I think that's also going to be a huge benefit for local businesses. Definitely an arena not to ignore if you're a local business. I think if anything, you should be putting more time into your Google Maps or Google Business Profile presence, right? E-commerce, right, is starting to become more and more integrated in large language models. So we're at the very entry phase of that, where ChatGPT and these other systems are starting to incorporate and do direct integrations into systems like Shopify. So I think we're going to see more and more of that for sure. Ads. So, a couple platforms are starting to experiment with advertising. Again, ChatGPT, OpenAI seems to be kind of leading this direction, although it's been kind of very slow. You can kind of see where the model's going. Really think anything that you experienced in traditional search, I think that's going to start bridging out into these other large language model dominant systems. The other thing too is I think in the next 12 months, the next 24 to 48 months, we might see more and more stuff going to voice search, right? I think early on, like I know Gary Vaynerchuk was very big on, oh, voice search is going to take over the world, when we had our Amazon Alexas and our Google, Home Assistant and all that stuff. And yes, a lot of us use that, but it's not what the vision was set out to be. But I think now we're getting to a point where there may be less and less, or rather more and more screenless devices, whether it's a pair of glasses, a health band, where we're getting away from the screens and it's directly voice, right? So yeah, there's lots of wild stuff around the corner. I'll be here to, to dabble with it when it's here. So
Yeah, Chuck, he's a good guy. I know that he's all about YouTube right now. Like he
yeah,
said, that's why I think that makes sense. And there's just one of those guys that I follow just to see, hey, what are they doing, right? What are they doing
right.
in the marketplace? I see a lot of stuff from Neil Patel and his Uber Suggest and some of those tools. And I know that you use mostly the Google tools primarily. Looker
Yeah,
Studio, you talked a little bit about that.
yeah,
Most people don't know what that is, don't know how to use it, but it's a great tool. You've built some of your own proprietary dashboards, right? That's just pulling from that
exactly. Yeah,
studio that
yeah,
work well. Adam, you've really shared a lot. I mean, hopefully, ones that have watched this podcast today are going to go back, make sure they listen to some of the ideas presented here, because that could really take it far. I'll just add this into it: is Google Notebook is really a
yeah,
great tool.
right.
Being able to take transcriptions or even video. Let's just say you sat your iPhone up and you talked about something, just put
Yeah,
that video privately, upload it into Google Notebook, and you can output some really cool stuff in their studio. That's really one button click kind of stuff.
yeah. Yeah, Notebook LM and some of the stuff Google is doing is pretty cool, right? I use it a lot for if there's topics that are very dense, I'll put it into the Notebook LM platform and I can understand it, as a layman would, right? Which is super cool to have at your disposal.
100%. You create a topic, throw all your resources in there, and then create something. It's pretty
Yeah.
amazing. Maybe this is one of those questions I wanted to ask you. I didn't have a chance to ask you. Is when you're doing SEO on YouTube videos, is
Yeah.
there a particular tool that you like to use? I know that there's a couple out there. I know TubeBuddy is one of them. There's another one out there that I know a lot of video gamers use. Is there tools that you like to use for SEO on the video side?
I'll be honest, we don't go crazy with tools on
Okay.
YouTube. Sometimes we'll use like our own like influential network to push stuff, shoot out an email encouraging people to watch it, that sort of thing. I think the key is the same, whether it's automated or systemized, is having engagement early on after a video goes live. That's the key, right? So I think if you have a good email list and you're going down the route of YouTube videos, like make sure that you align the launch of your video with an email, right? That's a good example to get that engagement. Or maybe you have a big social media following. That's a time to like signal to your network, hey, check out this video we just pushed out, because that's going to incentivize the algorithms to push you up higher, right? That's the kind of tactics we use. I can't say that we have any particular tools outside of the native ones that we use for that, but that's a good example of how we would leverage further reach with those platforms.
Awesome. And there was one other thing that came to mind. Last question is, on these LLMs, they don't take as long as traditional SEO.
No.
Usually when I talk to somebody and we're selling SEO, we're talking about a 6 month to 9 month before you see real results.
Yeah.
There's some low hanging fruit up front, but usually it takes time to work itself out depending on the investment.
Yeah.
The AEO side's much different in GEO. I mean, what is it that you're finding for time frame when you're doing some of the things you talked about earlier in this video?
Yeah, I mean, really, in certain verticals, we can make something pop in general search almost as quickly as large language models. But I think the longer window is, and this is the larger conversation, is just because I get something to rank doesn't mean you're going to see incremental traffic, in the first 2 weeks. I think that's the larger scenario when we're talking about timelines. And so I think that same conversation exists with large language models. It's probably even expounded just because it's still a very small market share of actual traffic. To give you an example, ChatGPT, last I checked, has less traffic than DuckDuckGo as a search engine.
I saw that.
DuckDuckGo is a small percentage of Google's traffic, right? So, everybody's very enamored with where do I show up in large language models? But I think the bigger conversation, and the one that we try to have with our clients, is let's actually break down what percentage of your actual traffic is coming from all these different channels, whether it's LLMs, traditional search, direct ads. And in that realm, we've become a little bit more agnostic about traffic channels as long as we're growing the pie as a whole, still trying to understand the segment. Yeah, it's very easy in certain verticals to show up in large language models, but then the question is, how valuable is this? And that's where proper attribution and planning and strategy come into play, right?
100%, 100%. I love what you said. The percentage of loss, and this was a question I asked AI a couple of days ago, is what kind of loss of SEO traffic to websites have been experienced in the last 6 months? And it basically said that 30%, 20 to 30% of enterprise websites have lost that amount of traffic. Are you seeing that kind of stuff happening right now?
I wouldn't say 30%. I would say, well, starting out with the growth of large language segmentation is probably between 1% and 5%, depending on the client. I think that tracks with the industry. And I think it depends on industries. We have a few industries that are outliers where they're actually growing in organic traffic. But also, the part of the problem is some of that segmentation isn't as clear as it used to be, where organic traffic is sometimes being swallowed up with direct referral, as it's being pulled into other traffic sources. So not quite 30%, but I think, especially the changes that Google is implementing, that could be a reality, right? Soon.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it in my own agency, and I was looking at an international company. I'm like, wow, this is really blowing my mind, seeing the loss of traffic.
Yeah.
But then the same token, right there in SEMrush, I'm seeing 37% of their traffic coming from AI.
Yeah.
Which that kind of blew my mind. I have to dive deeper into it, and that might be one of those ones we work on together. So I'm looking forward to working with you on several projects.
Yeah,
And again, appreciate you being on the show. And again, the audience that takes time to watch this, you're going to walk away with some really good tips. So thanks for watching.
That's a wrap on this episode of SwarmCast. Thanks for tuning in and arming yourself with the marketing firepower to keep your pest control business thriving. Before you scurry off, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode and leave us a review. It helps us spread like a well-placed bait station. Got a topic you want us to tackle? Drop us a line and let's keep the conversation buzzing. Until next time, stay sharp, stay strategic, and keep swarming the market.